maintain this sense of propriety, keeping everything going.
In England, well, in America they call it chutzpah. In England they call it front, right? The great thing about chutzpah is a little joke, you know. The guy's murdered his mum and dad, and he's standing in front of the judge, and the judge is about to sentence him to death, and he says to the guy, "Well, have you anything to say, you know, you poor wretch, you know, before I, you know, pass sentence, you know, in your own defence?" And the guy says, "Yes, I'm an orphan." Well, I was an orphan, and you know, so more front than Brighton. Chutzpah, you have to have a lot of front in this world. It's kind of like, you know, General George Patton or whatever. You know, they always have these guys who are kind of larger than life in the front, at the back of the army, while the other guys are doing the fighting. He's there, you know, taking all the laurels. You know, I think in life you need a bit of front. Here's our friend here, you know, that investigates corruption in the police force, for example, you know. Well, you could have balls of brass to do stuff like that. Being a rock and roll tour manager's a slightly other thing, but balls of brass would help with that too.
Well, that's an interesting point you make, because I think something else that does tie these books together is all of you in one way have such a strong sense of responsibility of doing your job in the midst of total chaos, and even in Tom's book, I was fascinated by your dedication to the dedication to the book is not to his lovely new wife, but instead to the Australia. He writes, "This book is dedicated to all Australian defence personnel who are far away from home doing their job, whether they agree with why they are there or not." And I think I was impressed that this comes out over and over in your book. This idea of you want to talk a little about.
Well, yeah, I went over to entertain the troops, obviously in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I went over there not because I wanted to help out the diggers. I went over there just to have a look, and I was just really, really curious. And I didn't agree with the war. I thought it was not a good idea. So I just went over there just because I could, essentially. It was quite selfish. I wanted a bit of adventure in my life. But when I went over there, what I found out was, it turns out that all the troops are like us. They don't all agree with it either. It was a real revelation for me. And so, especially in Iraq, I found lots of people just trying to tell me that they were not into the war at all. In fact, they'd always seem to take their time to say, just quietly, just between you and me, we think that this is all a bit shit house as well. And that was really quite fascinating. I kind of thought that the Defence Force, it's a bit stupid, but I thought that they were like, I thought that the army would be like the two dickheads in my class who joined the army. You know, I thought they'd all be the same as those two cockheads, you know what I mean? But it turns out there's a diversity of cockheads. And, no, I'm joking. There's a diversity of people. I met people who could have been me, you know, who went to university. And you might remember in the 90s, it's still probably the same. You could graduate you could go to university and the army would pay for that tax-free. So there are some people who did that. And went to uni, it got paid for by the Defence Force. Maybe they didn't have many options in their life. And when they went, they thought, you know, it's fine. We're Australia. We're not going to go invading some other country without UN approval. That would never happen. Germany did that shit in World War II. We don't do that. And then we did it, and then they ended up in a war that they didn't want to be in. Because it turns out when you join the army, you don't get to pick and choose the wars you go to. You don't get to go, that's a cool war, I'll get involved in that one. Oh, that one's a bit shit. No, I'm going to pass. I'm going to sit this one out if you don't mind. Like, you have to go to all of them, which is really shit. So that's the little catch they've got when they pay for your uni. But, you know, I met people who were perfectly reasonable and had very similar political views to me. But they were just over there doing what they had to do.
Yeah. One of the funny things you encounter almost right away are all of what the Defence Forces love of acronyms, and you helpfully include a glossary of acronyms. I was flipping back, and do you want to tell us about ISOPREP forms?
Oh yeah,
That's one of my favorites.
I think it stands for Isolated Personal something. I've forgotten now.
Yeah.
What's it stand for? Can you check my book, please?
I forgot too.
I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to remember it.
I think we should all make up something that it stands for. What are the initials?
Yes, it's an isolated person report.
Isolated person report. Yeah, I actually got told to fill out one of these at my first meeting with the army. And what the guy told me was, he said, this form is so that you can be identified if you're taken hostage. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, these gigs sound really good. And he said what you have to write down is, he said you have to write down things, questions that only you can answer, like what's your favourite colour, what was the name of your first dog, where did you go on holidays as a kid, that kind of stuff. And he said, because what will happen is, if you're taken hostage, you will have a bag on your head, the SAS will come kicking through the door, they will be shooting people around you while yelling out these questions. And I thought, that's a bit too much pressure for me. Like when I'm internet banking, in my pyjama pants, home alone with all the time in the world, I can barely remember my mother's maiden name, let alone this shit I've written down on a form months earlier with some army dude and all this pressure. Like, they're going to kick in the front door, bang, what's your favourite colour? Green! Bang, he's gone. What's the name of your first dog? Butch. Was it Fluffy? Oh, fuck, and I'll get shot in the head for having a short attention span. My last dying thought will be, I should have paid more attention. Bang! Yeah, but my favourite acronym is TLA, and that stands for three-letter acronym. I'm serious. It's like, so you could say, like, PIN, that's a TLA. ATM, that's another TLA. Stands for three-letter acronym.
Well, what's great is now all of you have heard a sample of what the Australian Defence Forces got to hear, because this is a big theme of the book.
Yes.
Third country nationals are another
TCNs. Yeah, they were fascinating.
Yeah. Tell about that.
Well, when I first got there, at first I thought I was just going to do stand-up routines about things that reminded everyone of home. I was there around Christmas time, New Year's Eve. I thought I'd do a bit of, cute material about what it was like growing up in the country or something, and take them out of their day-to-day life. But when I got there, I just started looking around, and everything was just stupid and ridiculous. And I was allowed to say whatever I wanted, and everyone else who was there didn't get to do that. So I thought I'd really take them up on that. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, even straight away, like, one of the first camps, one of the guys took me aside, and he just straight away said, look, say whatever you want, but just don't say the C word, right? Now, block your ears if you're going to be offended. Because I jumped straight on stage and I said, hello, nice to be here. The guy in charge over there, g'day, how are you? He said, whatever, I can say whatever I like as long as I don't say cunt. And anyway, good to be here. And then he looked all annoyed and everyone's laughing heaps. And I'm like, oh, well, what's he going to do? Send me back to Australia? Oh, what a shame I don't get to hang out in this shithole, And I realised that straight away. And so I was making fun of a lot of the things I'd see right under my nose. And on the first day that I got there, I learnt about TCNs. And TCNs, that stands for Third Country Nationals. And TCNs, what they are, they're people from India and Pakistan, predominantly, who are in the camps in Iraq and Afghanistan, but mostly in Iraq at the time, to take care of the day-to-day boring stuff that soldiers don't want to do. So they run the canteen, and they do all the laundry, and they clean up all the shit, and they do the garbage service and stuff like that. Because it turns out the troops, you're not going to get there anyway, they weren't very good friends with the Iraqis, and they couldn't really let them into their camps. Because it turns out when you go around shooting people's sisters, they don't want to clean up your shit, right? So they couldn't trust other people coming into the camp. So they had to hire people for about $1 a day from other countries and fly them in just to do that stuff. So the idea of, like, you're on latrine duty doesn't exist now because they pay people to do that. And so when I'd start my gig, straight away I'd do a bit of, hello, are there any Australians in? And they'd be like, woo, very excited. And are there any Americans in? And they'd be like, yeah, woo! Because they're easy to excite. And and to them, I'd say straight away, I just want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you to all you US soldiers for supporting Australia's war in Iraq. And that'd be straight off the bat. They wouldn't get it, and that's cool. And that's fine. I was there for the Australians, that's cool. You would have got it if you were there, Janet, because you're very switched on, and I can tell that. But it just turns out that these particular soldiers, who are very different to you, didn't get it. And but then I'd always finish off, and I'd say, are there any New Zealanders in? And then they'd be there, and then, whatever, make a cheap sheep joke, whatever I had to do to get myself over the line. Let's be honest, they all had guns. I was just doing what I had to do to get some laughs. And I've worked through the very different countries. Are there any Canadians in? Yeah, Canada is my favourite part of America. Easy jokes. Anyway, then I'd always finish by going, are there any TCNs in? And there'd always be nothing. And then there would be a laugh because everyone realised that there aren't any TCNs. And I'd say, that's because they're too busy cleaning up all your shit for $1 a day You tight fuckers. Anyway.